My name is Margaret Bennett, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived a quiet, content life, and for the most part, my family has always been my greatest joy. I raised my daughter, Sophie, on my own after her father passed away when she was young. It was difficult, but we made it work. Sophie has always been the light of my life, and I have tried my best to give her the support and love she deserves. Sophie met Daniel when she was in her late 20s, and from the moment she introduced him to me, I was impressed by his charm, his confidence, and the way he seemed to fit so naturally into our lives. He was kind to me, respectful to Sophie, and I welcomed him into our family with open arms. After all, he was the man my daughter chose to spend her life with. I saw him as a son, not just as a son-in-law. They married a couple of years later, and soon after, they had children of their own. Everything seemed perfect. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and milestones together, and I often opened my home to them. I was a proud grandmother, and I loved spending time with my grandkids. Life was good, or at least that's what I thought. I've always been careful with my belongings. I may not have much in terms of wealth, but I've worked hard for what I have. Over the years, I've saved up a bit, and I've accumulated a small collection of family heirlooms, including gold jewelry that has been passed down through generations. These pieces aren't just valuable because of their monetary worth, but because of their sentimental value. They were my mother's, her mother's, and so on. They were treasures not just because they were gold, but because they carried the love and memories of our family history. I always kept these pieces locked in a small safe in my bedroom, in a drawer beneath my clothes, tucked away where no one would think to look. I didn't wear them every day, only on special occasions like holidays or family events, but I took comfort knowing they were safe and sound. I had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss, but that all changed on a day I will never forget. It was an afternoon like any other, quiet and uneventful. I had planned to clean out a few old drawers in my room, something I had been putting off for weeks. As I was sorting through some old papers and photographs, I remembered the jewelry in the safe. I hadn't looked at it in a while, but I thought it would be a good idea to check it over. I had considered getting it appraised, perhaps selling a few pieces I no longer wore. It was time to update my will too, and I wanted to ensure that the heirlooms went to Sophie when I was gone. I walked to my bedroom, opened the safe, and immediately froze. The box that had contained the gold jewelry was gone. I stood there, staring at the empty space where it used to sit, a cold lump forming in my throat. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. First, I thought I was mistaken. Maybe I had taken it out recently and forgotten. But when I checked every drawer, every corner of the safe, I knew something was wrong. The jewelry was gone. All of it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my mind in a state of disbelief. Someone had taken it. Someone who knew exactly where it was. Someone who had been in my house. And the thought that came to me, the one I could no longer push aside, was this: it had to be Daniel. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't process it. Daniel, my daughter's husband, the man I had welcomed into my home, the man I had treated like a son, had stolen from me. My mind refused to accept the reality, but the evidence was undeniable. It wasn't just the theft that shook me, it was the betrayal. How could he have done this? He had been in my home countless times, and I had trusted him. He was family. My heart began to pound as I tried to think clearly. How could I confront him? What would I say? Would Sophie believe me? I couldn't imagine telling her that her husband, the father of her children, had stolen from me. She would never forgive me if I was wrong. I didn't even know if I could prove it. I had no way of knowing how he had taken the jewelry or when. But one thing was certain. I couldn't just ignore it. I couldn't let him get away with it. I spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and suspicion. I watched Daniel closely, but he seemed normal, too normal. He came over to visit like usual, and I could see no signs of guilt on his face. If anything, he was acting as if nothing had changed. But I knew something was off. Something didn't feel right. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, but I had no idea how to get them. How could I confront him without making things worse? How could I accuse him of something so serious without evidence? The thought of breaking up Sophie's family, of causing a rift that might never heal, paralyzed me. But I knew I had to do something. The weight of the discovery hung over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't let it go, couldn't ignore it. I needed answers. But how do you confront a man you once trusted? A man who is part of your family, with an accusation so grave? After the initial shock wore off, I found myself spiraling. I couldn't focus, couldn't think straight. The world around me felt like it was spinning, but I was stuck in place, anchored by this awful revelation. My safe was empty, and my jewelry, the pieces my mother had left me, were gone. The sentimental value of those treasures was immeasurable. I knew I could replace them in monetary terms, but nothing would ever bring back what they represented. Family history, the love that had been passed down through generations. I spent the next few days in a fog of anxiety. I couldn't bring myself to speak to Daniel or Sophie, couldn't look them in the eye without feeling like I was hiding something, like I was about to betray them by confronting Daniel. But the truth was, I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. I needed to know what had happened. I had to know who took my gold. I tried to convince myself that I was wrong, that maybe I had misplaced it, or perhaps Sophie had moved it to help me. But deep down I knew that wasn't the case. I had been careful with those pieces of jewelry, and I had kept them in a place that only I knew about. No one else should have had access to them, not without my knowing. My mind kept returning to Daniel. I couldn't deny the nagging feeling that something wasn't right with him. Over the past few months, I had noticed small subtle changes in his behavior. He'd been offering to help more around the house, more than usual. He'd offered to take out the trash, to do some repairs, to run errands. At first, I thought nothing of it. He was just trying to be a good son-in-law, trying to be helpful. But in hindsight, I now saw that his eagerness to be around me, to be in my space, had increased in direct proportion to the disappearance of my gold. Could it be possible? Could Daniel, the man I had accepted as family, be capable of stealing from me? The thought was unbearable. I had never suspected him of anything other than being a loving husband to Sophie and a good father to my grandchildren. But what if I was wrong? What if I had been blind to something much darker beneath the surface? I knew that I couldn't confront him without some proof. I needed to be sure. But how could I find the evidence? I wasn't sure where to start. I wasn't a detective. I was just a mother, a grandmother, trying to make sense of a betrayal that had shaken me to my core. The first thing I did was look for any signs of where he might have hidden the jewelry. My house wasn't large, but I hadn't really checked the places Daniel had been around. Maybe he had hidden it somewhere, maybe in the garage, or under the floorboards. I searched the house meticulously. I checked the rooms, under furniture, inside closets, behind drawers. But nothing. It was as if the gold had vanished into thin air. The house felt like a different place now, as though it were full of hidden secrets. I kept looking, but the more I searched, the more I felt like I was running in circles. I needed a new plan. The next step, I decided, was to talk to Sophie. I needed her to help me. After all, she was his wife. Surely she must have noticed something. But the thought of involving her filled me with dread. How could I accuse her husband, her partner, of something like this? What if I was wrong? What if I was misinterpreting everything? But I had to ask. I had to know if she had noticed anything strange, anything at all that could explain what had happened. I knew it would be difficult, but I had to confront her. She deserved to know the truth, even if it was painful. I waited for the right moment. Sophie called me one evening to check in, as she always did. It was a calm, quiet conversation, the kind of call we had every few days. I could hear the sounds of my grandchildren playing in the background, and for a moment, it almost felt like nothing had changed. "Sophie," I said softly, "I need to ask you something." "What is it, Mom?" she replied, her voice warm and concerned. I've noticed something strange. Some of my things have gone missing. Specifically my jewelry. You know the gold pieces I keep in the safe? They're gone. Have you seen them anywhere?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. At first, I thought she might have been taken aback by the question, but I didn't hear anything from her. No sounds of the children, no rustling. It was as if the whole house had gone quiet. "Mom, what do you mean they're gone?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled, almost too controlled. "I mean exactly what I said," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "The jewelry is missing. I know I locked it away, but when I went to check on it, it was gone. I can't find it anywhere. Have you seen Daniel near the safe?" There was another long pause, and then Sophie answered, her voice tight. "Mom, I don't know. I haven't seen anything." But there was something in her tone that didn't sit right with me. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded almost resigned, like she already knew something but wasn't ready to admit it. Do you know where Daniel's been lately? I asked. My voice was quiet, cautious, but I had to press on. Has he been around your things in your room, in my room? Have you noticed anything strange? Sophie hesitated. I don't know, Mom. He's been acting a bit strange lately, but I don't think he would do something like that. He's not that kind of person. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, but I wasn't sure if she was in denial or just trying to protect him. Either way, something didn't add up. I knew she didn't want to believe it, but I needed her to hear me. Sophie, I don't want to believe it either. But I have to know the truth. Please, if you've seen anything, if you've noticed anything out of the ordinary, I need you to tell me. Another long silence. And then finally she spoke again. I'll talk to him, Mom. I'll ask him if he knows anything about it. Her words didn't reassure me. I knew that something was happening behind the scenes, but Sophie wasn't ready to see it for what it was. She still wanted to believe in her husband, in the man she married. I couldn't fault her for that. But the truth had to come out, and I wasn't going to stop until I knew what happened. As Sophie promised, she spoke to Daniel. But I knew that this was only the beginning of unraveling the truth. The more I searched for answers, the more I realized that this betrayal might be deeper than I imagined. After my conversation with Sophie, I didn't feel any more reassured. She had agreed to talk to Daniel, but something in my gut told me that he was hiding something, and I wasn't sure if she was ready to confront that truth. I understood her need to protect her family, to defend the man she had chosen to marry. But the evidence was mounting, and I couldn't ignore it. My gold was gone, and the only person who could have taken it was Daniel. I decided I couldn't just wait for Sophie to talk to him. I had to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't sure how much I could trust my instincts, but I had to trust the signs. The way Daniel had been acting, the way Sophie seemed to avoid my questions, it all pointed to one conclusion, even if I didn't want to admit it. That evening I made up my mind. I would confront Daniel directly. I couldn't let this linger any longer. This constant feeling of dread and suspicion. It wasn't just about the gold anymore. It was about the trust that had been broken, the sense of betrayal that was eating away at me. I needed to know the truth, and I wasn't going to rest until I got it. The next day I called Sophie and asked if Daniel was home. She told me he was, and I knew this was my chance. I need to come over, Sophie, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There's something I need to talk to Daniel about. Something important. Her voice faltered. Mom, I don't think this is a good idea. I talked to him, and he swears he didn't take anything. Maybe you're just mistaken. I wasn't mistaken. I had checked every place in my house, every drawer, every corner. I had searched for days. I knew what I had seen, and I knew what I hadn't. The gold was gone, and Daniel had been the only one with access to it. I understand you want to protect him, Sophie, I said softly, but I need to do this. Please let me come over. Sophie hesitated, but eventually she agreed. Okay, Mom. But please don't make a scene. I don't want this to turn into something it doesn't need to be. I promised her I wouldn't make a scene, but deep down I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. How could I stay calm when the man I had trusted, the man I had welcomed into my family, had stolen from me? How could I sit back and pretend everything was fine when a betrayal this deep had taken place? When I arrived at Sophie's house, I felt a sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. I tried to shake it off to calm my nerves, but it wasn't easy. Daniel was sitting on the couch when I walked in, looking completely normal, as if nothing was wrong. Sophie was in the kitchen preparing tea, and for a moment, it felt like a typical family gathering. But underneath it all, I could feel the tension in the air, like a time bomb waiting to go off. Hello, Margaret, Daniel said, his voice warm but strained. He stood up to greet me, but I could see the way his eyes flickered for just a second, an expression I couldn't quite place, but one that made me more suspicious. Daniel, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, we need to talk. Sophie stepped into the room just as I spoke. She glanced between us, sensing the shift in the air. Mom, what's going on? Why are you being so serious? Sophie, please step aside for a moment, I said, my voice firmer than I had intended. I could see the worry in her eyes, but I knew I had to do this even if it hurt her. She looked hesitant, but she moved toward the kitchen, her footsteps quiet and reluctant. Now it was just Daniel and me. He stood there a little too still and I could feel my pulse racing. "What's this about, Margaret?" he asked, trying to sound calm, but there was a nervous edge to his voice. "Don't play dumb with me, Daniel," I said, my voice tightening. "You took my gold. You took the jewelry from my safe. I want to know why." The look on his face faltered for just a second, just long enough for me to see that I had hit a nerve. But then, his expression hardened, and he crossed his arms defensively. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice a little too casual. "I haven't taken anything from you. I don't even know what you're accusing me of." I didn't back down. "Don't lie to me. The gold is gone and you've been in my room. You've been helping around the house more than usual, trying to be extra helpful. Why? What are you hiding, Daniel?" For a long moment he didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me with a strange intensity. Then finally he spoke. "I don't know what you think you know, but I haven't taken anything. I haven't even seen your gold in years." I didn't believe him. I knew he was lying. The way he kept avoiding my gaze, the way his voice wavered just a little too much, it was all too obvious. But I couldn't accuse him without proof. I needed more than his word. I took a deep breath. "If you didn't take it, Daniel, then why won't you look me in the eye? Why are you so defensive? You've been in my room, you've had access to my safe, and now my jewelry is missing. I don't want to believe this, but I have no other explanation." At that moment, Daniel's demeanor shifted. His posture, which had been defensive, softened slightly, and I saw something in his eyes. Something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't guilt, but it was something darker, something I couldn't quite define. "I don't know what you're implying, Margaret," he said, his voice growing lower, almost threatening. "But I suggest you stop accusing me of things you don't understand. You don't know what's going on here. You don't know everything." The weight of his words hit me like a slap. "What are you talking about, Daniel?" I asked, my voice trembling now. "What is going on?" But before he could answer, Sophie entered the room, her face pale, eyes wide with worry. "Mom, what's happening? Daniel, what is she talking about?" Daniel shot her a look that I couldn't interpret. It was almost like a warning, like he didn't want her to know the truth. I felt a chill run through me. What was he hiding? Why was he so defensive, so angry at the thought of being caught? And what had he done with my gold? Sophie looked between Daniel and me, her face contorted with confusion. "What's going on, Mom?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, as though she sensed the tension in the room. "What are you accusing Daniel of? What's this about my gold?" Her question was like a pin popping a balloon of anger and fear that had been building inside me. Sophie's voice shook, and I realized that she had no idea how serious this was. She had always trusted Daniel just as I had, but now I was beginning to wonder how much she truly knew about him. Did she have any idea what he was capable of? "Mom, please just tell me," Sophie pleaded. "What's happening? You've been acting strange lately. Why are you accusing Daniel of something so terrible?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. It wasn't just the loss of my jewelry. It was the betrayal of someone I thought of as family. And worse, it was Sophie's husband, the man she loved, who I was accusing. But I couldn't ignore the truth anymore, no matter how painful it was. "Sophie, I'm not accusing him without reason," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of frustration and sadness. "The gold that I had in my safe, the family heirlooms that were passed down to me, they're gone. All of them. And Daniel was one of the only people who had access to them." Sophie's face drained of color, her eyes flickering back to Daniel. She didn't know what to say, what to think. The man she had built her life with was being accused of theft by her own mother, and I could see the struggle on her face. Daniel stepped forward then, as if trying to defuse the situation, but his actions only deepened my suspicion. "I told you already, Margaret. I haven't taken anything," he said, his voice low, yet it carried an edge of hostility now. "Why are you so insistent?" Daniel stepped forward then, as if trying to defuse the situation, but his actions only deepened my suspicion. "I told you already, Margaret. I haven't taken anything," he said, his voice low, yet it carried an edge of hostility now. "Why are you so insistent on blaming me? What do you expect to gain from this?" His words hit me like a slap in the face. There was something in the way he spoke, in the coldness of his tone, that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just the accusation. It was his defensiveness. Why was he getting so angry? Was he hiding something? Sophie, you need to listen to me, I said, my voice firming as I looked directly at my daughter. I know it's hard to believe, but Daniel's behavior has been strange. He's been around my room more than usual, offering to help me with things he never cared about before. And now my gold is gone. Don't you see that it's too much of a coincidence? Sophie looked from me to Daniel, her face pale and her eyes clouded with confusion. She didn't want to believe it, and I understood why. This wasn't just about my gold. It was about her life, her family, her trust in her husband. I knew she wasn't ready to accept the possibility that Daniel, her husband, could be lying to her, could be taking from us all. I don't believe this, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone in particular. This isn't Daniel. He wouldn't do that. The word stung, and I felt a wave of frustration well up inside me. Was I really the only one who could see the truth? Why was everyone so quick to defend him? Was I the one who had lost my mind? Don't you see, Sophie? I've been living in this house for years. I know when something's not right. The pieces are missing. And I know who had access to them. He's been sneaking around, and now the gold is gone. I can't just ignore it. Sophie shook her head, stepping away from me, her eyes filling with tears. I don't want to believe it, she said softly, her voice breaking. But if what you're saying is true, why wouldn't Daniel just tell me? At that moment, I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Sophie was caught between her loyalty to her husband and the painful realization that her mother, the person she trusted most, was accusing the man she loved. And Daniel, standing there so calm and so controlled, wasn't offering any answers. He wasn't showing any remorse, no sign of guilt. It was like the world was unraveling around me. Sophie wasn't the only one who had trusted him. I had trusted him too. I had let him into my home, into my life, and now I was forced to face the ugly truth. I'll prove it, I said, my voice hardening. I will find the proof, and I'll make sure everyone knows the truth, even if it means destroying your marriage. Sophie looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. Mom, don't say that, she pleaded. Don't go there. We can work this out. Maybe we just need more time to figure out what happened. But I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't just sit there and let this go. I had trusted Daniel, and he had betrayed me. There was no more time for denial. It had gone too far. Sophie, I've given him too many chances, I said firmly. He's taken something from me, from our family, and I'm not going to let him get away with it. I turned to Daniel, who was still standing there, his arms crossed, staring at me with an almost cold indifference. Where is it, Daniel? I demanded. Where's my gold? You took it, and you think you can hide it from me. But I won't let you. Not now, not ever. For a long moment, Daniel didn't say anything. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of anger flash in his eyes. You're making a mistake, Margaret, he said, his voice now icy. You don't know what you're talking about. You think you can accuse me of something like this, but you don't know the whole story. I didn't know if I was ready for whatever he was going to say next, but I was determined to find out. What do you mean, Daniel? What story? What aren't you telling me? Daniel took a step closer, his face just inches from mine. You don't know the whole truth, but you will soon enough. His words sent a chill down my spine. What was he hiding? What did he mean? The tension in the room was unbearable, and I realized that this confrontation was just the beginning. The truth was out there, and it was darker than I could have ever imagined. The moment Daniel's words hung in the air, I knew the confrontation had reached a new level. You don't know the whole truth, but you will soon enough, he had said. The coldness in his voice, the way he stepped closer to me. There was something sinister beneath it all. I had been holding on to the hope that maybe I was wrong, that perhaps I was just overthinking things. But with his words, I realized just how much I didn't know. I tried to remain calm, but every instinct inside me screamed to push harder. I couldn't let him manipulate me. I couldn't let him intimidate me, not this time. What are you hiding, Daniel? I demanded again, my voice sharper now. What are you not telling me? His eyes flickered, a brief flash of discomfort crossing his face, but he quickly masked it with a veneer of indifference. You don't understand, Margaret. You don't know what you're dealing with. This is bigger than you think. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. What did he mean by that? What could be bigger than the theft of my gold? What was he trying to hide? Sophie, still standing in the kitchen, must have sensed the tension growing because she appeared at the doorway, looking between us with wide eyes. "What's going on, Mom?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. She could see that things were spiraling out of control, but she had no idea how deep this betrayal went. "I don't know yet, Sophie," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Daniel. "But I'm going to find out." The words seemed to rattle Daniel, but he quickly composed himself. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, pacing back and forth. "You're both making something out of nothing. I haven't taken anything from you. I'm not a thief." But his words rang hollow. There was an underlying desperation in his voice now, and I could feel it. He was starting to crack under the pressure, and I wasn't going to back down. "Why are you so defensive?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Why are you lying about something so serious? What are you trying to protect?" His eyes met mine, and for a brief second, I saw a flicker of fear in them. It was gone in an instant, but it was enough to make me certain that he was hiding something more than just the gold. This wasn't just about the jewelry anymore. It was about something much darker, something deeper. Sophie, sensing the rising tension, stepped forward again. "Mom, please, I don't know what you're thinking, but this isn't like Daniel. I know him, and he's never given me any reason to doubt him." Her words stung. She was defending him even after all that had happened. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She didn't want to believe what I was suggesting. I couldn't blame her. This was her husband, the father of her children. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't let this go. "Sophie, you have to listen to me," I said, trying to hold back the emotion in my voice. "I've trusted him for years. I've welcomed him into my home, into our family. But something's wrong and I can't ignore it. I'm not making this up. The gold is gone, and Daniel is the only person who had access to it." I could see Sophie's eyes waver, but she was still holding on to her belief that her husband was innocent. "I can't believe it, Mom," she said quietly. "I just can't." Daniel, sensing that he was losing ground, suddenly raised his voice. "This is insane, Margaret. You're making accusations that you have no proof of. What do you expect me to do, confess to something I didn't do? This is all just a misunderstanding." But I could see through the cracks in his story. I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface, the fear he was desperately trying to conceal. He was lying, and I was getting closer to finding out why. As the days passed, I couldn't stop thinking about what Daniel had said, about how this was bigger than I thought. What did he mean by that? Why did he seem so determined to keep me from uncovering the truth? I had to get to the bottom of it, no matter how much it hurt. I knew that the next step was to look beyond just the gold. There had to be something else, some other piece of the puzzle that would help me understand what was really going on. And so I began to dig deeper. I started by looking through his things. I didn't want to, but I knew I had no other choice. Sophie would never let me search their bedroom, but I could look through the items he kept in the garage, in his workshop, or anywhere else he might have hidden something. My gut told me that there was more to this than just the gold. The next morning, I went into the garage while Sophie was at work and Daniel was out running errands. It was my chance to look around without anyone questioning me. I started by going through his toolboxes, checking the cabinets where he kept his supplies. But nothing seemed out of place. Everything was neat and orderly, just like it always had been. But as I moved to the back corner of the garage, I noticed something strange. A large duffel bag tucked away behind a pile of old boxes. I hadn't seen it before, and my curiosity got the better of me. I approached it carefully, not sure if I should open it, but feeling an undeniable pull. I unzipped the bag slowly, my hands shaking as I did. Inside, I found something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't gold jewelry, but it was something just as valuable, something I hadn't expected to see. It was a stack of cash. A large amount of cash, neatly folded and hidden away in plastic bags. And it wasn't just a few $100s. There were thousands, enough to make me question everything. The sight of the money made my heart race. What was going on? Why was Daniel hiding cash like this? Where had it come from? I knew I had to confront him again. But this time the stakes were higher. I wasn't just looking for gold anymore. I had uncovered something far more sinister than I could have imagined. The duffel bag sat there, its contents staring up at me. The money was neatly stacked, as if it had been carefully concealed, tucked away out of sight for a reason. Thousands of dollars. More than I had seen in one place in my entire life. But the most unsettling part wasn't the amount. It was the fact that Daniel had been hiding it from everyone, especially Sophie. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. How had I not seen the signs earlier? How had I been so blind to the reality of what he was doing? I knew I couldn't let this go. The jewelry was bad enough, betrayal wrapped in gold. But this was worse. The money wasn't just a theft. It was a sign that something far darker was at play. Why would Daniel, a man who had been living in my home, a man I had trusted, hide money like this? What was he involved in that he couldn't share with his own wife? What had he been doing behind our backs for all these months? I had to confront him. But this time I wasn't just confronting him about the gold. This time I had evidence. Evidence that he had been lying, hiding things, and deceiving everyone he claimed to love. I couldn't back down now. I waited until evening, when Daniel came home from his errands. Sophie was with the kids, and it seemed like the perfect time to get answers. The air felt thick with tension as I walked to the living room where Daniel was sitting, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I entered, and I could already tell he knew something was coming. The silence between us spoke volumes. "Daniel, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but beneath the calm exterior my anger was boiling. I couldn't believe what I had found, what I was about to confront him with. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "What's this about now, Margaret?" he asked, trying to play it cool. But I saw the subtle twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes flickered to the side, betraying his calm facade. "I found something," I said, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "Something that doesn't add up. I found a bag of cash in the garage, thousands of dollars, hidden in a duffel bag." His face instantly hardened, his expression darkening. For a moment he said nothing. He just stared at me as if deciding what to say. I could feel the tension building, the heavy silence hanging in the air. But I wasn't going to back down. "Where did it come from, Daniel?" I asked, my voice demanding an answer. "Why was it hidden? Why was it in the garage of all places?" He shifted in his seat, looking anywhere but at me. He wasn't even trying to come up with a plausible excuse. The guilt was written all over him, and I knew I had him cornered. I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice faltering slightly. "There's no bag of cash. You're mistaken, Margaret. I don't have any money like that." I felt a sharp surge of anger. "Don't lie to me, Daniel," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. "I saw it with my own eyes. I know what I found. And now I want to know where it came from." Daniel's hands clenched into fists, and I saw a flash of frustration in his eyes. He stood up quickly, his movements sharp, and for a moment I thought he might explode. But he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, looking at me like he was weighing his options. "I don't have to explain myself to you," he snapped, his voice hardening. "You're making something out of nothing. You've been going through my things, invading my privacy. I don't owe you any answers." The anger in his voice only confirmed what I had feared, that he was hiding something much bigger than I had ever imagined. He wasn't just lying about the gold, he was lying about the money, about everything. "You owe me the truth, Daniel," I said, stepping closer to him. "You owe me an explanation for what's been going on. You've been acting strangely for months, offering to help more, sneaking around when you think no one is looking. What is going on? What are you hiding?" He was silent for a long moment, his jaw clenched tight. Then finally he spoke, his voice low, almost as if he were talking to himself. "You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't get it." I stepped back, my heart pounding. "Try me, Daniel. Because right now I'm the only one who's trying to understand. You're the one hiding things, lying to your family. And I'm not going to stand by and let you get away with it." He hesitated, his face twitching with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe? But then just as quickly he shut it down, retreating behind a wall of indifference. "You don't know what you're accusing me of. You have no idea what's really going on. Just drop it, Margaret." But I couldn't drop it. I couldn't ignore the truth that was sitting right in front of me. Daniel was hiding something, and I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered what it was. "Why don't you just tell me, Daniel?" I asked, my voice quiet now. Why don't you tell me the truth about where the money came from? About what you've been doing behind our backs?" For a moment I thought he might finally break, might confess to what he had been doing. But instead he just walked away, shaking his head. "You'll never understand," he muttered under his breath as he turned to leave the room. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my mind reeling. What was he involved in? What had he been doing all these months? And why was he so determined to keep me in the dark? As he walked out of the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Daniel had just shown me a side of him I never expected. And whatever it was, I was determined to find out the truth, no matter where it led. The confrontation with Daniel left me feeling shaken. But it also gave me a sense of clarity I hadn't had before. His defensiveness, his anger, the way he tried to deflect everything, there was something much deeper at play here. This wasn't just about gold or stolen cash. It was about something far more complicated. Something that could destroy the life Sophie thought she had with him. I had to find out what he was involved in, and I wasn't going to stop until I had the truth. Daniel was a liar, and his lies were beginning to unravel in front of me. But the more I searched, the more I realized just how much he had been hiding, and just how far he was willing to go to protect his secrets. After the confrontation, I spent days trying to piece things together. I couldn't shake the feeling that the money in the garage was connected to something much more sinister. I started by looking through his financial records. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to do it. Sophie trusted him with everything, and if I was going to protect her from the truth, I needed to understand it myself. I wasn't sure where to begin, but I started with their joint bank account. I had access to it, though I hadn't used it much. It had always been Sophie's domain, and I had respected her privacy. But now it felt like the only way forward. I logged into the account and began to sift through the transactions. At first it seemed normal, bills paid, groceries bought, the usual. But then I came across a string of large withdrawals. The amounts were inconsistent with their typical spending habits, and the dates lined up with the same time periods I had noticed Daniel's erratic behavior. It wasn't just a one-time withdrawal. It was several, spaced out over the last few months. I felt a cold chill run down my spine as I traced the amounts, each one larger than the last. One of the withdrawals stood out. A $5,000 cash withdrawal made on the day. I noticed the jewelry was missing. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. It was too much of a coincidence. I knew then that this wasn't just about my gold. Daniel had been using the family finances for something else. Something illegal, something I couldn't yet fully understand. But I was getting closer. The next step was to talk to someone who could help me uncover the rest of the truth. I couldn't do this alone. I called my old friend Lisa, who worked as an accountant. She had always been a source of wisdom and had helped me with my own finances in the past. I trusted her, and I knew she could help me understand what was really going on. When I met with Lisa, I showed her the bank statements and asked her to help me make sense of it all. She looked at them closely, her brow furrowing as she went over the details. "This doesn't look right, Margaret," she said after a few moments. "These withdrawals aren't just for normal expenses. They're large and they seem to be happening at odd intervals. This doesn't match the pattern of typical spending." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward, my heart racing. "I mean," Lisa said slowly, "that these withdrawals could be a sign of something much bigger. They could be tied to a gambling problem or worse, something like money laundering. If these transactions are happening on top of regular household spending, that's not a good sign." I felt the blood drain from my face. Money laundering? Gambling? I had no idea Daniel could be involved in something like this. But Lisa's words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been looking for something tangible, some evidence that would explain the missing jewelry and the money in the garage. But now I realized I was looking at something that could bring the whole family crashing down. Lisa continued, "If you really think Daniel is hiding something, you need to look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about the gold. It's about what's behind all these transactions." I nodded, though I felt numb. I had started this journey looking for my gold, but now I was uncovering something far darker. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep Daniel's lies went. But there was one more step I had to take. I couldn't stop now. I needed to confront him again, but this time I needed to have everything in front of me, the financial records, the bank statements, everything. I couldn't let him weasel his way out of this one. I couldn't let him destroy my family without facing the consequences of his actions. That night, after Sophie and the kids had gone to bed, I waited for Daniel to return. I knew it was the right time. He wouldn't expect me to confront him again so soon. And I could feel the weight of everything coming to a head. When he walked through the door, I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him, and the silence between us was thick with tension. Daniel knew this wasn't going to be a typical conversation. He had to know that I wasn't going to let this go. Finally, I spoke. "We need to talk, Daniel. And this time, I'm not leaving until I get the truth." His face tightened. "What now, Margaret?" he asked, his voice laced with annoyance. I held up the bank statements, the evidence of his deceit staring him in the face. "You've been taking money from our account. You've been lying to Sophie and to me. I know what you've been doing, and I'm not going to stand by and let you destroy this family." Daniel's expression faltered for the briefest moment before he regained his composure. "You don't understand what you're accusing me of. You don't know the whole story." "I'm not accusing you of something I can't prove, Daniel," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You've been hiding things for months, and I'm done pretending like I don't know. Where is the money coming from, and what have you been involved in?" He hesitated. His lips parted as if he was about to speak, but nothing came out. And in that silence I saw it, the crack in his facade. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. The silence between us was heavy, almost suffocating. I had been staring at Daniel, waiting for him to speak, my hands shaking as I gripped the bank statements. The evidence was there, clear and undeniable, but I needed him to confess. I needed him to finally admit to what I already knew in my gut. For a long time Daniel said nothing. His eyes darted back and forth, as if he was weighing his options. I could tell he was struggling with something much bigger than the gold, bigger than the money. This was his life, his secrets, and everything was about to come crashing down. Finally, he took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "I never wanted you to know this, Margaret. I never wanted Sophie to find out either, but it's too late now." The look in his eyes was not one of guilt, but something more complex. Fear. Desperation. I couldn't tell. But whatever it was, it made me feel sick to my stomach. "Tell me, Daniel," I said, trying to control my emotions. "Tell me everything." He exhaled sharply, and then the words came out in a rush. "I've been struggling for months. I've gotten involved with the wrong people, and I've been trying to get out of it. But the money, the gold, the cash, it's all connected to a debt I owe." I felt a knot form in my stomach as I listened. "A debt? What kind of debt, Daniel?" He looked away, his voice lowering. "I owe money to some very dangerous people. People who don't take no for an answer. And when things got tight, I started taking the money, your money, to try and cover the debts. The gold wasn't enough to pay them off, so I started making large withdrawals from the bank account, just trying to keep up." I stared at him, horrified. The man I had trusted, the man I had welcomed into my home, had been gambling with our lives, and I had no idea. My mind was racing as I processed what he was saying. "You've been gambling, Daniel? And you've been taking from our family to cover your debts?" He nodded, looking ashamed. "It wasn't supposed to get this bad. It started small, just a few bets here and there, but then it spiraled. I thought I could control it, but I couldn't. And I didn't know how to tell Sophie. I couldn't tell her what I had gotten myself into. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A gambling addiction? Money laundering?" He had been hiding it all, not just from me but from Sophie, the woman he claimed to love. The depth of his deception was unimaginable. "Sophie doesn't know any of this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She doesn't know that her husband has been stealing from her family to cover his gambling debts?" He shook his head. "No. I couldn't tell her. I thought if I just kept it under control, no one would ever know. But the truth is, I've been hiding it for months. I've taken money from you, from Sophie, from everything, and I don't know how to fix it." I was in shock, unable to process everything at once. This was the man Sophie had married, the man who had promised to care for her and their children. And now I was learning that he had been living a lie, hiding his addiction, using our family's trust and money to feed his habits. "Daniel, this is not just about money anymore," I said, trying to hold back the tears that were welling up in my eyes. "This is about your lies, your deceit. You've taken from us all. And now Sophie is going to find out the truth. How are you going to face her?" Daniel looked down, guilt washing over his face. I don't know. I'm scared, Margaret. I never meant for any of this to happen. But now I don't know how to fix it. I stood there, the weight of everything bearing down on me. My daughter's husband had betrayed us, not just by stealing, but by living a secret life I could never have imagined. Sophie had trusted him, and now I had to be the one to tell her the truth. I had to protect her, protect my grandchildren. But how could I break her heart? How could I tell her that the man she loved had lied to her for so long? For a long time there was silence between us. Daniel didn't have the answers I was looking for, and I didn't know where to go from here. He had confessed, yes, but that wasn't enough. The damage was already done. The trust had been shattered, and there was no going back. Finally I spoke. You need to tell Sophie the truth, Daniel. You need to tell her everything. She deserves to know, and she deserves to decide what happens next. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. I will. I don't know how to make this right. Neither do I said quietly. But you've got to start somewhere. You've already taken so much from her. Don't take her chance to heal from this too. The next day, Sophie came over to my house. She looked at me with concern, her eyes searching for answers. She must have known deep down that something was wrong. The air between us was heavy, and I knew that I had to tell her everything. As we sat down, I looked at Sophie, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. Sophie, I began, my voice breaking. There's something you need to know. It's about Daniel. The moment I told Sophie the truth, I saw the world fall away from her. Her face paled, and her eyes went wide with disbelief. The words I had spoken, the truth I had been forced to reveal, had done more than just expose Daniel's secrets. It had destroyed the life she thought she had. Mom, no. No, this can't be true, Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel wouldn't do this. He wouldn't. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the hope that maybe I had made a mistake, that maybe this was all just a horrible misunderstanding. But I knew it wasn't. The evidence was clear, and Daniel had confessed. She could try to deny it all she wanted, but deep down I knew she felt it too. The betrayal. The heartbreak. Sophie, I didn't want to hurt you, I said softly, trying to hold her gaze. But you need to understand what's been going on. You deserve the truth, and you deserve to know what Daniel has been hiding. Her hands trembled as she wiped away tears. Why didn't he tell me, Mom? Why didn't he come to me if he was in trouble? I would have helped him. I would have done anything. I wanted to tell her that Daniel's shame had kept him silent, that his pride and fear had prevented him from reaching out. But I didn't have an answer that could ease her pain. There were no words that could make this better. I don't know, sweetheart. But what he did, what he's been hiding, isn't something that can be fixed overnight. Sophie stood up, pacing the room, her thoughts clearly racing. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to face him now. How could he do this? How could he lie to me for so long? I watched her, feeling the weight of her pain, of the devastation she was facing. This was her husband, the father of her children, and yet everything had been built on a lie. The man she loved had been hiding a dark secret, and now it was all exposed. There was no going back. I don't know, Sophie, I said quietly, but you need to decide what's best for you. And for your children. You need to think about what kind of future you want, with or without him. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her face drawn with sorrow and confusion. I don't even know who he is anymore, Mom. This isn't the man I married. This isn't the man I thought I knew. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free, and I moved to her side, wrapping my arms around her. I know, sweetheart. I know. The days that followed were filled with confusion, hurt, and uncertainty. Sophie spent a lot of time alone, processing everything I had told her, everything she had learned. Daniel, for his part, was quiet and distant. He avoided any real confrontation with her, seemingly too ashamed to face the consequences of his actions. But I knew that Sophie couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. She had to confront him, had to face the truth about what he had done, and what he was capable of. When Sophie finally sat down with Daniel, the conversation was inevitable. She demanded answers, asked him why he had lied, why he hadn't been honest with her from the start. His excuses were weak, his apologies empty. He said that he had never meant to hurt her, that he had gotten in too deep, but none of it made a difference. The damage was done. Sophie couldn't look at him the same way anymore. They spent hours talking, and when it was over, Sophie came to me with tears in her eyes. "I don't know what to do, Mom," she said, her voice shaky. "I love him, but I don't know if I can forgive him for this. How do I live with someone who's been lying to me for so long?" I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what the future held for them. All I could do was offer her the support she needed and remind her that she had every right to make her own decision. Whether or not she could ever trust Daniel again was something only she could decide. The weeks that followed were filled with tension. Sophie stayed with me for a while, trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her marriage. The truth hung over them both, and it felt like there was a constant storm brewing in their home. Daniel tried to make amends, but his apologies felt hollow, like he was saying the words just to make things better, not because he truly understood the extent of his betrayal. Finally, Sophie made a decision. She told Daniel that she needed space, that she couldn't continue living with him while there were so many unanswered questions. She needed time to heal, to think about what her future would look like. She needed to decide whether or not she could trust him again, and that would take time. Sophie's decision was a turning point for her. It was a painful one, but it was the right choice. She wasn't going to stay in a marriage built on lies. She wasn't going to let herself be dragged down by someone else's mistakes. For me, it was a reminder that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to protect the ones you love from the truth, even when it's the right thing. Sophie's life had been turned upside down, and I couldn't fix it. I couldn't undo what Daniel had done, but I could stand by her and support her as she found her way through the wreckage. As for Daniel, his future was uncertain. He had broken the trust of his wife, his children, and his in-laws. How could he rebuild that trust? Was it even possible? I wasn't sure. But one thing was certain. I had learned a painful lesson about family, about trust, and about how fragile everything can be when the truth is hidden for too long. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control how I responded to it. I would stand by my daughter, support her as she rebuilt her life, and never let anyone take advantage of my love and trust again. In the end, that was all I could do. Stand by her, and let her find her own way forward.